Imagine your bank's security system works perfectly. I
Hmm.
mean, it verifies your fingerprint, it checks your GPS location, it confirms the exact device you're holding in your hand.
Right. Every single high-tech perimeter check just passes with flying colors.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And yet, you still lose your life savings in a matter of seconds.
It's terrifying.
It really is. How is that even possible? Well, welcome to the deep dive. We're doing a custom analysis just for you today, digging through a stack of highly detailed financial intelligence to uncover the hidden lightning-fast world of modern payment fraud.
Yeah, and the mission here is really to figure out how criminals are pulling off these massive heists right under our noses.
Right, often using the very security systems that were designed to protect us in the first place.
Exactly. But to understand how it happens, we actually have to completely rethink our definition of what a bank heist is today. I mean, it is no longer a physical binary event.
Like where a lock is broken and an alarm sounds.
Right, exactly. The days of a guy in a ski mask with a note are largely over.
Which is a huge fundamental shift. Because I think, a lot of us still picture payment fraud as a fairly straightforward crime. Like, someone skims my credit card at a gas station, they buy a flat-screen TV online, and I just call a 1-800 number to dispute the charge.
Yeah, the classic chargeback scenario.
Yeah.
But the intelligence we're looking at today reveals a completely cross-functional, highly organized risk.
Right. Criminals aren't just stealing card numbers anymore. The sources show they're actively exploiting trust, they're manipulating authentication protocols, and they're intensely analyzing human user behavior.
All to extract value and disguise the illicit movement of money. That is the core theme we need to establish from the jump here.
Yeah, it's huge.
Payment fraud is not a narrow operational issue. It's not just something confined to a customer service rep processing a dispute. It is what the sources call a life cycle threat.
Okay, let's unpack this. A life cycle threat. That implies this isn't just a one-off event, right? It's a process with distinct stages.
Precisely. The thing you have to understand is that by the time a fraudulent payment is actually initiated, the underlying controls that should have prevented it well, they've already been bypassed.
Or weakened, right?
Yeah, weakened weeks or even months prior. The fraudulent payment itself is literally just the visible end product of a much larger chain of compromise.
Wow. So the payment is just the grand finale.
Exactly. And that chain often begins with massive data breaches leading to identity theft or complex social engineering campaigns or the active recruitment of money mules.
So it intersects with, like, cybersecurity, anti-money laundering, and even third-party vendor risk.
It touches everything.
So if the payment is just the end of this massive criminal life cycle, how are they adapting to all the different ways we spend money today? Because the sheer adaptability of these criminal networks mentioned in the sources is staggering.
Oh, it really is. They essentially shapeshift depending on the specific payment rail they're attacking at that moment.
Like tailoring their methods to the environment.
Exactly. They look at the speed of execution and the specific hurdles a bank has set up. So if they're attacking card environments, they rely really heavily on automated botnets.
Right. The sources mentioned card not present fraud and testing attacks.
Yeah, testing attacks are huge. They'll take thousands of stolen card numbers and make tiny, unnoticeable purchases.
Like a 50-cent charity donation or something.
Exactly, just to see which cards are active before they hit them with a massive charge.
But then when they move into merchant and acquiring contexts, the tactics change entirely. The intelligence details things like fraudulent merchants, transaction laundering, and something called triangulation fraud.
Triangulation fraud is fascinating.
I want to pause here, actually, because triangulation fraud is a perfect example of this shape-shifting. How does a criminal actually triangulate a fraud?
It's a brilliant, albeit totally malicious, piece of engineering.
Yeah.
So let's say you're browsing online for a high-end blender.
Okay, I love a good smoothie.
Right. You find a generic-looking storefront offering it at a really steep discount. You buy it, entering your perfectly legitimate credit card information.
And I assume this scam storefront just steals my money and never sends the blender, right?
See, that would be the old way. In triangulation fraud, the scammer takes your order, but they don't actually steal your card details.
Wait, really?
Yeah, instead, they take a different, previously stolen credit card number from someone completely unrelated to you.
Oh, wow.
And they go to a legitimate retailer, like a major department store website, and they buy the blender using that stolen card, but they put your home address as the shipping destination.
That is wild. So a few days later, a blender just shows up at my door.
And you're happy because you got what you paid for.
Right. And the major department store thinks they just made a normal sale.
Mm.
But the person whose stolen card was used, takes the financial hit.
Exactly. And the scammer just walks away with the clean cash you paid them on their fake storefront.
That is brilliant and terrifying. They successfully laundered stolen credit card funds into clean, untraceable cash through a legitimate consumer.
And it's incredibly difficult to detect because the major department store shipped a physical good to a real person.
And me, the buyer, I never report an issue because I got my blender. I have no idea I was part of a crime.
Exactly. You're an unwitting participant.
Well, here's where it gets really interesting. Because the environment that makes all of these sophisticated schemes vastly more dangerous is the exact same one that we all demand as consumers.
Oh, absolutely. The need for speed.
Right. We love instant payments. We want to be able to split a dinner bill and have the money show up in our friend's account before we even leave the restaurant.
We expect it to be instantaneous.
But the intelligence makes it very clear that real-time payment rails are a massive double-edged sword.
They really are, because in the past, traditional payment controls relied heavily on post-event detection.
Like after the fact.
Yeah. The banking system operated on delayed settlement, or they required manual review processes. If a fraudulent transfer was flagged, a bank usually had, 24 to 48 hours to freeze the funds.
Right. They had time to investigate and reverse the transaction before the final financial loss crystallized.
But faster and instant payment rails reduce that margin for intervention to almost zero.
It's like the difference between sending a physical letter and sending a text message. Back in the day, if you mailed a fraudulent check, someone could literally intercept the mail truck or stop it at the clearinghouse the next morning.
Exactly. You could physically pull it back.
But real-time payments are like hitting send on a text. Once it leaves your phone, it arrives on the other person's screen instantly. There is no pulling it back.
None at all.
Once the money hits the receiving account, it can be dispersed into an untraceable network of accounts in a matter of seconds.
Which fundamentally changes the mandate for financial institutions. They can no longer rely on retrospective review because recovery opportunities literally vanish the second those funds are released.
So they have to catch it before it leaves.
Exactly. Institutions are forced to adapt to pre-transaction, near real-time risk decisioning. If a bank cannot detect suspicious behavior before or during the execution of the transfer, they are going to face permanent financial losses.
Not to mention massive exposure to wider money laundering risks.
Oh, for sure.
But wait, hold on. Let me push back on that for a second. Because catching a bad payment before it leaves sounds great in theory, but I literally just changed my phone number last week.
Okay.
I logged in from a new Wi-Fi network at a coffee shop, and I set up a new payee to send my landlord rent. Why didn't my account get frozen?
That's a great question.
Like, if banks are trying to stop instant fraud by looking at all these upstream signals, how do they not end up accidentally blocking every single slightly unusual but totally legitimate transaction?
Well, that is the central operational challenge for every major financial institution today. And it's addressed through a framework of what the industry calls intelligent friction.
Intelligent friction.
The goal isn't to put up a concrete wall in front of every transaction. Static, rule-based controls like automatically blocking any transfer over $1,000, they're completely obsolete.
Because payment fraud is highly dependent on context now.
Exactly. The exact same payment instruction might be perfectly legitimate or it might be completely fraudulent, depending entirely on the surrounding factors.
So intelligent friction is less like a concrete wall and more like a bouncer at a club.
Oh, I like that.
The bouncer recognizes the regulars and just waves them right through without checking ID. But if someone shows up sweating profusely, wearing someone else's coat, and trying to hand over a heavily laminated fake ID...
Right. The bouncer pulls them aside for a lot more questioning.
Exactly. They don't block everyone, just the high-risk ones.
That is a perfect analogy. You want to introduce step-up verification only when the risk is genuinely elevated, because control design has to be calibrated incredibly carefully.
Because if you have too little friction, the institution is exposed to massive financial loss.
Right. But if you have too much friction, you degrade the customer experience, you increase shopping cart abandonment, and you create significant commercial damage.
Yeah, digital-first businesses will just go under if their customers can't check out smoothly.
Exactly. So how does the digital bouncer know when to step in?
Yeah, what are the signals they're looking for?
What's fascinating here is that the highest performing security frameworks don't just look at the dollar amount or the routing number in a silo anymore. They monitor the entire behavioral ecosystem of the user.
Behavioral ecosystem. So we're talking about behavioral biometrics.
Yes.
Meaning they're actually tracking how I physically interact with my phone.
They absolutely are. They look at the angle you hold your device, your typing speed, how hard you press on the screen, and even your typical navigation paths through the app.
Wait, really? How hard I press on the screen?
Yeah, because a scammer who has taken over your account might have your password, but they don't type it at the exact same millisecond cadence that you do.
That's crazy.
They don't navigate the menu the same way you do, and the system also looks for upstream anomalies.
Like the event chain we talked about earlier.
Right. Did this account just experience a password reset, followed immediately by a mobile number change, followed by a login from an unfamiliar IP address, and then a rapid transfer to a brand new beneficiary?
Wow. When you stack all those behavioral breadcrumbs up, the risk profile completely changes. You move from reacting to a lost payment to proactively disrupting a crime in progress just based on how the user is behaving before they even hit send.
Exactly. But this brings us to one of the most complex challenges in modern financial crime. What happens when the behavioral biometrics match perfectly?
What do you mean?
I mean, the typing speed is correct, the device is recognized, the location is the user's living room, the machine sees the genuine customer doing the action.
Right. If banks are tracking all these device logins to catch hackers, what happens when it's actually my phone in my hand, but a scammer is on the other end of the line telling me exactly what to type?
Exactly. And this is the critical distinction between unauthorized fraud and authorized fraud.
Let's break that down for the listener, because that distinction is huge in the sources.
It is. Unauthorized fraud is exactly what it sounds like. It's transactions made without the customer's knowledge. This is your classic account takeover where a hacker breaks in.
Right. You didn't do it, a criminal did.
Right. But authorized fraud is fundamentally different. This occurs when the customer is psychologically manipulated into initiating the transaction themselves under false pretenses.
Because the criminals realize that hacking a multi-million-dollar bank firewall is hard, but hacking a human being's sense of panic or trust is actually quite easy.
Unbelievably easy, unfortunately.
The intelligence breaks down a few major scam typologies here.
Mm.
We have impersonation scams, where someone calls pretending to be the IRS or your bank's fraud department.
We see devastating romance scams and investment frauds, too.
But the one that really stood out to me in the reading was invoice redirection fraud.
Oh, it's highly targeted and incredibly destructive.
Let's walk through how that actually plays out for people. Right. Imagine you're a home buyer and today is closing day. You're stressed, you're excited, and you're waiting for the final wire instructions to send your, say, $100,000 down payment.
A huge amount of money.
Right. And you get an email from your real estate agent. It has the agency's logo, the agent's signature, and an attached PDF with the routing numbers.
Looks perfectly normal.
Completely normal. You take that PDF to your bank or you type it into your banking app and you send the money. You did everything right. Except a hacker had been sitting silently inside your real estate agent's email server for weeks.
Yeah, just watching the communications.
And at the exact right moment, they intercepted the real email, swapped the bank routing numbers on the PDF to their own account, and hit send.
This raises an important question regarding how institutions handle these two different realities.
Because the bank just sees you making the payment.
Exactly. From a purely technical standpoint, with authorized fraud, the system worked entirely as designed. The authenticated user requested a transfer and the bank executed it.
But it's still fraud.
Right. From a financial crime standpoint, both unauthorized and authorized fraud are criminal exploitations of the payment system. Both require incredibly robust prevention and detection frameworks.
Even though the legal treatments and reimbursement obligations differ significantly depending on where you are.
That's right. The regulatory landscape around who pays for authorized fraud is shifting fast, but from a security perspective, it's all crime.
Which makes sense, because whether the fraudster hacked the account directly or they tricked the homebuyer into doing the heavy lifting for them. Once that $100,000 successfully moves, where does it go? Criminals aren't just hoarding digital numbers on a screen.
No, they need to use that stolen value in the real world.
Exactly. If we connect this to the bigger picture, a fraudulent payment is rarely the end of the crime.
It's merely the start of the next phase in the criminal life cycle. Money laundering. Fraud-generated funds require rapid concealment.
Because the clock is ticking. The home buyer is going to show up to the closing table, realize the title company never got the money, and the alarm bells are going to start ringing.
Exactly. The criminals know they only have hours, sometimes just minutes, so the funds are blasted downstream. They use the very same instant payment channels to disperse the stolen funds into mule networks.
Let's define that, because a money mule sounds like someone swallowing balloons of cash at an airport.
Oh.
How does a digital mule network actually operate?
A digital money mule is simply an account used to receive and immediately transfer illicit funds to obscure their origin.
Just a middleman.
Exactly. And sometimes these mules are complicit criminals setting up shell businesses to wash the money. But very often, they are completely unwitting participants.
Really? How does that work?
Well, a criminal might post a fake remote job online, hire a victim, and tell them their first assignment is to receive company funds into their personal bank account and forward them to a quote-unquote supplier via cryptocurrency.
Oh, wow. So the home buyer's down payment lands in the new remote worker's account. The remote worker buys Bitcoin and sends it to the scammer's wallet, and suddenly the money has vanished across 3 different borders and asset classes.
Exactly. And if a bank only logs the initial fraud loss and completely ignores that downstream flow, they are missing the entire architecture of the crime.
They're just looking at the tip of the iceberg.
They absolutely are, which means the fraud department, who is trying to stop the initial theft, and the anti-money laundering team, who is trying to track the layered funds, cannot operate in silos anymore. A single transaction bridges both of their worlds.
So how is a bank actually supposed to fight back against this? I mean, it sounds like they're up against massive, coordinated, shape-shifting networks that move at the speed of light. What does the operational response even look like when a behavioral biometric red flag goes off?
It requires intense governance and what we call a coordinated defense.
Coordinated defense.
Yeah. When suspected payment fraud is identified, a modern institution doesn't just send a ticket to a single queue anymore. The payment event warrants simultaneous review.
Like a war room.
You essentially need a digital war room, yes, where fraud operations, AML investigations, cyber threat teams, and customer service are all looking at the same data at the same time.
Because a single weird instant payment could mean someone's password was guessed. Or it could mean they are currently on the phone being manipulated by a scammer. Or it could mean they're operating as a money mule for an international syndicate.
Yes. Without coordinated handling, critical intelligence just gets lost. But even a war room isn't enough if you're fighting yesterday's war.
What do you mean by that?
The frameworks require continuous scenario testing. Institutions have to understand which payment rails and which customer segments generate the highest exposure today, not last year.
Because the criminals adapt so fast.
Exactly. If an institution builds a static rule based on historical data, the criminals will map that rule, they'll figure out the threshold, and just pivot their tactics slightly to slide right under it.
So control frameworks that aren't actively recalibrated based on real-time threat intelligence degrade incredibly fast.
They become useless almost immediately.
Wow. And while we've spent a lot of time breaking down the mechanics of triangulation fraud and behavioral biometrics, it is so important to bring this deep dive back to the human element.
Oh, absolutely.
Because for you, the listener, payment fraud isn't just a spreadsheet problem or an interesting tech puzzle.
It's not. There is a profound human cost here that institutions really must acknowledge.
We talked about the home buyer losing their down payment. That isn't just a financial loss on a ledger. That is the destruction of a dream, massive emotional distress, and sudden terrifying chaos. Or imagine standing at the grocery store. Your card declines, and you realize your account has been drained. You can't buy food for your family. It completely shatters your trust in the institution's ability to safeguard your life.
Which is why a professionally mature response requires institutions to combine highly sophisticated security with deep empathy.
Right. It's not just about locking down the account.
No, it requires clarity, fairness, and really timely communication. It's about preserving customer confidence in the integrity of the environment just as much as it is about mitigating the balance sheet loss.
So what does this all mean? When we boil down this entire stack of intelligence, the core insight is that modern payment fraud weaponizes the movement of money itself.
Yes.
It exploits the trust we have in digital channels, in our devices, in our banks, and in each other, just to generate unlawful value.
And to fight it, we have to recognize it as a life cycle threat requiring a completely integrated framework. We're talking fraud prevention, identity assurance, AML awareness, behavioral analytics, and real-time decisioning.
It's a completely new paradigm for financial security. And it leaves me with a final thought that I want to pass on to you to mull over.
I'm curious where you're going with this.
Well, we started by exploring how criminals absolutely thrive on the speed and seamlessness of modern digital banking. They are literally using our demand for instant gratification against us. So if convenience is the very thing being weaponized to steal from us, Will the future of financial security require us to willingly sacrifice our digital convenience to protect our wealth?
That's a really heavy question.
Well, we have to ask for more friction, more delays, and more questions just to keep our money safe. It's a new frontier for you to consider the next time you casually hit send on an instant payment. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive today. Keep questioning the systems around you.